Hello everyone. So this is a continuation video of the series Hyperledger Fabric 2.x. Um, in this video is a basically a continuation from my chain code part 1. If you have not watched that video, I highly recommend that you watch that video and come to this video, only then it will make sense. Or if you are familiar with setting up Hyperledger Fabric, if you know the basic how to deploy a chain code and everything, then we can directly skip that previous video and you can start from this video itself. All right, so let's get into this video. Basically, first of all, I first apologize for everyone for the delay in posting this video. I was stuck up with many other works and I had some problem with my Ubuntu OS as well, so I got so it took some time for me to resolve everything and come back. Anyway, we'll no issues. I think going forward, at least I'll try to be a little consistent. Mm. All right. So today I am going to start this video with one simple question. Okay. So from our previous video, we understood that Hyperledger Fabric everything works with key value pair, right? So if you know a key, you know how to fetch value. Okay. So we wrote a simple chain code to read and write data. If you remember, we just wrote this piece of code in our previous video. Read data, write data, init ledger. There is small change in this anyway. I'll come to that. So you understand that if you know a key, you can get the value, right? To store a value, you need a key, right? So K1, you put some string, K2, you put a string, K3, you put a string. So to fetch that particular string, you pass that value either K1, K2, K3. So that's how things work, right? So let's say if the sample size of the data is very small, you're just going to store some 5-10 data. It's okay, it's fine. Store it as a key value because you can remember the key and you can just fetch it back. What if you have like hundreds of data? How are you going to remember all the keys? Okay, you want to fetch some data. Say for example, you have an employee database in Hyperledger Fabric. Okay. So you want some information about Mr. Muthukrishna. Okay. How are you going to figure out what is his key? Let's say you are using the employee ID of the key. You just know his name. You don't know the employee ID. Okay. So, but you want the data. How are you going to fetch it? Right. You want to know about an employee whose role is all manager. Okay. Um, how are you going to get that kind of data in Hyperledger Fabric? Okay. Because as you can see, it clearly has put state and get state. The get state, you can pass a key, but you don't know the key. So what we need is we need an SQL type of querying mechanism, right? Um, so that is exactly what we are going to do or see in this video. We are going to see two things. One, um, how to store and fetch JSON data, and second, how to query a JSON data matching the strings. Okay, in SQL type, querying the data. Okay. So that's what we're going to look into the video. Let's dive into coding. Right now, it's time to run our chain code. As a first step, you all know that in order to run any chain code, we need to register some users. So let's run the two Node.js, which is enroll admin, which is required to register the user. Okay. Let's run that. Node enroll admin.js. Right, node register chess. Okay, so let's run node invoke chess. As you can see, what invoke JS does, basically we just going to pass the key and stringified JSON. Okay, similarly, we have in query.js we have evaluate transaction where We are calling the method and passing the key. We're returning the value in a variable called result, and let me just simply console.log result. See what happens. Let's run the all right. So apparently you can see that it is returning a buffer rather than a, string. So what happens? So it is returning a buffer, but what we are expecting is actually a JSON. Okay, so if you are getting a result like this, okay, look at it, it says buffer and numbers are there, which actually means you have not received a string data. So basically you have received a buffer. So what you can do is you can convert a buffer to a string and try to parse it. Okay. So let's try that and see if that works. Okay. Because as you know, the communication between the smart contract, which is Chaincode, to the SDK happens as a buffer. Okay, the data gets transmitted as a buffer. So let's convert this buffer to a string. Let's put a result or to result dot. So when you are converting a buffer to string, you should mention the UTF-8 format. Yes, so console.log. See what this is now. Right? And run again. And you see that still have not received the actual data. Okay, instead, it has just converted this object to a mm, you know another JSON type, but within the JSON, the data is still as a buffer array. Apparently, we do not have the actual data, so the mistake is not here. It is actually is there in our app.js. Okay. Let's check our app.js. What we do need to do now here in the read data, let's do the same step. The read data. Here what we have done is like we are directly stringifying, but the stringify will not work here because the response which we are getting is not really a JSON string, because the response here we're going to get is actually um, a, uh, a buffer itself. Okay. Convert that here. Okay. So whatever step we did there, we'll do it here. Chain code once dot once dot ut. Okay. Now we got a response, and this response I'm trying to do a JSON dot stringify, and I'm sending this JSON string now to back. Let's see if this works, and what are we going to do? So like usual, we'll rerun our network. Step that fabric down. Right now, it's done it. Okay, made a mistake. Like always. Response. And three. So while this is running, guys, I want to tell you something that see. First thing, in order to make this video takes a lot of effort. The reason because um, I'm doing this kind of live. I'm not record everything or pre-record things. I don't have a script. Just copy that and doing it and making a voiceover on it. I'm doing it on mostly live. So inevitably these kind of mistakes also do come. Uh, the reason why I'm doing it because you will also face certain problems which I might face when doing it on live. So you will understand okay how to debug and stuff. Okay, that's the reason I'm doing this way. Um, Please subscribe. Also comment. I know many of you are asking for updates. It's my bad, I couldn't update. Now that I'm planning to be a little consistent. Of course, don't forget to subscribe and also ask your friends to subscribe. See, like not even reached 200 so far. So help me get more subscribers. So that is the only thing that will keep me motivated to keep on posting, right? Okay. All right. See that? This is what we wanted. Just got it. In the query.js, you can see the log result has come with the actual data which we posted. All right, so that's awesome. Okay, so that from here, the first part of the video gets over. In our next part, we will see how to do a dynamic query, right? All right, so now that we were able to store a JSON file and also we were able to retrieve a JSON file. Now we will try to use queries to fetch our data. So far we've been fetching data using the key. Now we will use queries to match the attributes and we'll try to fetch some data. Okay. But to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke multiple JSON. So I have some multiple data already just written here, P1 to P3 or key names. And each key has a patient detail and each patient has three attributes, which is name, diagnosis, and hospital. Look at it, the name is kind of unique in all 5 data I have. And diagnosis, I have some 1 or 2 patients have common diagnosis, so we can demonstrate, you know, pattern matching query. Right? So to do that, we'll write a different method to do that, and let me call that method as async. Um, um, say query patients. Okay, usual text, and here the parameter is going to be a query string. Okay, or I'll say it's a query string, or I'll say query patients by, specifically we'll say patient by diagnosis, by diagnosis. So we'll say diagnosis. We have this method. So what we need to do first is we have to build a query. Okay, whenever you want to work with query string, you first have to understand how query string works. So I'm going to show you how to query any data from database. Okay, I'm going to open my Chrome. Open our CouchDB. Okay, so close dash it's and password, and let's see my channel Pepcar has the our init data and this P1 data. So one way you can look into the P1 data is just click the data and you see that the data is available there. Okay. Other way you can do is to by running a query with Mango. Okay. So what if you select that, you will see a small box here with some JSON. I've already used this query, so it's already appearing. Otherwise, you will see something like underscore ID colon something. So you just actually need this part. This is the default. Okay, so within a JSON string, you will have something called a selector. Within that selector, you have to specify what exactly you're looking for. Say, for example, you're looking for somebody with diagnosis as diabetes or cancer. So what it is going to say running this. Let's see what there's a no document found by diagnosis. It's diagnosis. Okay. When I say diagnosis, I received this, and you can see what this is. Okay. It's as simple as that. You can add multiple criteria here. Say, for example, you want to find the hospital. Anybody from Apollo, something like this, and run a query. There is nobody from that hospital. Figure out what is that hospital. Hospital is APOL. That's the spelling. APOL. Hospital. So many mistakes. Hospital. You got Apollo cancer. Same data. Since there is only one data, you are just getting one data. If there are more matches, it is going to display you more matches. So let's get back to our code and write this method. Let's call this. Let's first, what we need to do is we need to build a query string, declaring a variable. Let query string is equal to, and again query string equal to a selector. Selector equal to and diagnosis the parameter. So this method is going to fetch the user which matches the diagnosis which we pass in the parameter. Okay, so basically we're going to pass a string here. and this is the query selector which we built. So the command to call the query string, okay, we're going to write a once, or I'll say iterator equal to, we need to call the query string. So what happens before I get into writing the rest of the code? I'll explain what we're going to say. So in order to use that Mango query inside or chain code, what happens is that when you pass that query, this query string to mm, uh, the method, it is not going to return you the actual data. It is going to return you an iterator. And this iterator has multiple fields in it, which may or may not be relevant to you at this point of time. Okay, because this iterator you might be using for two reasons. One, if there are multiple JSON match that you get, you will probably go through this iterator and you will fetch that values. But at the same time, each of these values might also have some historical value. For example, the data where so this data, let's take this data: diagnosis, cancer, hospital, Apollo. uh, this may have multiple historical data. For example, before Apollo, you might have been admitted in a different hospital. Okay, maybe it's some 2 3 different hospital. So for the same key, it might also have an historical data. Okay, so the iterator is going to return you both. Okay, if you want to fetch historical data, you can also do that, or you can just want to match the list of current data, you can also do that as well. So let's go ahead and write the code to uh, get this iterator. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to write a method to call the or to pass the dynamic query string. So we have now formed the query string. The query string selector, or you can also write it in a different way, like selector.diagnosis is equal to diagnosis. But anyway, it's all the same. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call a method called get query results. That's the method name. Context dot sub dot get query result. Okay. So this get query result, as I said, is going to return you a what do you call an iterator. Okay, so let's pass this query string. I'm going to make this JSON string, and you have to pass. You cannot just directly pass JSON. You have to pass a JSON string. Remember that. So query string. Okay, so I'm passing the query string, and this query string is going to give us the iterator back. From this iterator, we need to fetch the data which actually we need. So for that, I'm going to write another method called a generic method called async get. I'm going to say so get values, or get from get iterator data. Oh, necessary methods here. Let me delete that which all I tried before planning to do. Okay, now get iterator data. What I'm going to pass now is the actual iterator. Pass the iterator. I'm going to pass the iterator object, this iterator object, and now we are going to loop through the iterator object. So what we'll do now is, so this iterator, what we need is basically an array of JSON. So let us design declare an array of JSON, say result array, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a while loop, while true. So I'm just going to run whenever, as long as there is an iterator. And when am I going to exit out of this iterator is when the iterator is over, which is when the response is done. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get or I'm going to loop through this iterator. To do that, the method is called iterator.next. Iterator.next. So this iterator.next is going to give you an individual object. Okay, and let's call that value or result, res, let's say, is equal to iterator.next. So this is going to give you the actual individual value. And what we need to know is that you have to understand how the this respond object looks like. So what are the values it will have actually? Okay, so what it will have is that now right here. So this will have two things. Okay, response will have something called a key. Okay, first thing. Second thing, it will have something called response dot value. Okay, so the response dot value will have one more data called response dot value dot value. Okay, so why there is a value dot value? Because the response dot value does not have the direct data. Okay, it will have the data as well as some more other metadatas. Okay, like timestamp, etc. But now I'm interested only in the actual data, so we need to get the value of value. What we are going to do now is we're going to do check if it is actually returning something. Okay, if it is returning something, if it has something, then we'll process it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an if condition. It says response.value, response.value exists. Okay, then we need to check whether response.value dot value also exists. Okay, I'm going to convert that final value to string and see if it exists. If it exists, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that into a simple JSON and I'm going to push it in this array. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, sorry, key also comes inside the value dot key. So it's like this. Okay, there is a value, inside value there is key and value. Okay, so value has multiple things. Um, one is key, one is value, and maybe. Okay, so if you actually convert this into a string and do a console log, you will actually see what are all other data it does has. I'll leave that to you guys. Whenever you want to explore, go ahead and print it in the console, and you will be able to see that console in the network monitor.sh. Okay, but I'm not doing that. I'm just directly going to do the coding. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to declare one more array variable. Say call it let JSON value. Okay, so I'll put it some or response status response. So I'm going to do this response JSON key. JSON key is equal to response dot value. Right, that is one thing, and the response JSON dot value is equal to response response dot value dot value. So this is going to give us the actual JSON which we wanted. But you all know that this JSON is actually stored as what you call a buffer. Okay, if you remember our read query, we converted that into two string UTF, right? So I'm going to do that here as well. I'm going to convert this into a toString of UTF-8, and so this is going to give me a JSON response. So I am going to uh, parse it as a JSON. Okay, JSON dot parse, because I want the actual data inside the final array. So this is going to give me a response JSON, and now I have the response JSON which actually has the key as well as value, and I'm going to put push that into the result array. So result array, which we have declared above, dot push. I'm going to add that response. So now so if the iterator is going to give me 5 values, it's going to push all 5 values inside the result array. Okay, so now we are done. Now we have to write a code to exit from this while loop. Okay, so how do you gonna exit from the iterator? If you have worked in iterator, you always will know iterator has always, it will have something called an exit method, or we call it iterator.done method. Okay, so I'm gonna check if the response dot next response done. Okay, so if there is no next, so it will reach this done method. Okay. If response dot done, which means, sorry, if response are done, which means that we are going to return this array. Okay, so before returning, we need to close the iterator. Always remember that your iterator needs to be closed when you are looping through. So wait iterator dot close. Okay, so now we close the iterator, and now we'll return return the result. Okay, so now that we have the array returned, okay, we need to call this method. Call this result iterator. Let's declare it. Similarly, let result is equal to this dot iterator data. And make sure you write the await. We don't want to skip it, right? So once that is done, we actually have an array. Okay, so this array, I'm going to pass it or return it. Return it as a JSON string. Okay, so I'm going to say JSON identify result. So now that I reason, awesome. So now we have written the code. Now the modification we need to do now is in the query.js. Okay, now we've been doing the evaluate transaction and commit into this. See, and here I'm going to call, instead of read data, I'm going to call method called query patient by copy. Copy and paste, control. So here, instead of sending the key, I'm actually supposed to send uh, the diagnosis. Okay, so in order to get more diagnosis, let's call something which more people have. If you look at this list of JSON, there is one guy has cancer, another guy has diabetes, and one more guy also has diabetes. There is another guy dialysis, and so diabetes comes twice, rest is all coming only once. So let's call diabetes. So see, now we got this. So this is going to return the result, and the result again we're going to do the same thing. And now what I'm going to do now, will deploy this chain code. Let's go back to step, fabric. I've saved that file. Saved. While this is running, I'll also going to give you a small tip. Okay, in order to understand how this how to write a dynamic query and how to do the iterator, I would recommend you to go to the Fabric samples GitHub. Okay, Fabric sample and samples, and look for set chain code. Chain code. You have this marbles chain. Go to that. Go to JavaScript. Remember marbles too. Go to marbles chain code.js. If you look at it, there you will have a lot of methods for this. You will have all kind of compose key. This what you need to look into is basically iterator. Get marbles by range, marbles by color. So look at here. This is basically querying the list of marbles based on the color. Okay, so what it does, it basically, if you look at it, it does the same thing. It has many other things. Let's get straight to our job, which is, you should refer this one, marbles by owner. Look at it, they have created a query string very similar to what we have done, and they're passing the owner of the marble, and they're calling a method called get query result for query string. Okay, this query result has get method like what we have written. If you look at this query result, this is basically internally it's going to call the get query result, and this get query result returns you an result iterator, and this result iterator you're going to pass into a method called get all results. Okay, so the coding style is a little different here, so don't get confused. It's basically the same thing what you've done. Okay, so this get all results, search for it, you will get another method written here. Results. What you need to, so this is the method. So this is a generic method they have used for both two things. Okay, whether you're just looking for the current data or whether you're looking for a history. So if you're looking for the history of a data, you will pass this flag called is history. Basically, you have to pass boolean. In case if it is history, it has some, you can fetch the transaction ID, timestamp, or it does whether it has a delete flag, etc. Otherwise, it is going to simply get the key value and push it in the all results. Okay, it like this small portion is what we actually did now. This is an overall generic method. You can instead of rewriting what we have done now, you can simply copy paste and reuse your method. It's a very generic method. You can just send this, you will get the result. Okay, if you are going to search for history, you will pass it true. Otherwise, you pass it false, you will get the results. Okay, just go through a line of codes. You will understand what they are basically doing. So I think it's enough for you. File is marbles. Okay, marbles example, marble 02 chain code, fabric sample. Remember that. Okay, our chain code is deployed, and now it's time for us to run and see if our code works. Okay, let's do that. User done. Now invoke. So while invoking, I'm going to invoke some few more times, and every time I'm doing control X, because there's no close, and just say written. Once it is done, it is gonna close by itself. Let's see. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to run this invoke.js 5 times. Okay, so that all this data gets stored in the CouchDB. Okay, so now there is P1. So now P1 should go into CouchDB. Submit it. Apparently the return is not. Why is it? Okay, doesn't matter. We'll check that. And now to comment this out. Page on this. You can simply loop through and run everything also. I'm a little lazy. That's why. As well. Patient 3. Yes. Yes. So right that comment patient 3 as well. Add page 4. Made the same mistake. No. Transaction has been submitted, so save. Last patient P5. Yes. Control. Now we have all the patient. Let's check that in our CouchDB. Everybody's there. My channel card. Yeah, P1, P2. I think somehow I missed, or maybe I did the P1 twice. I think. Add the patient to patient. Save. Oh, I missed this. See. So we have everybody now. So now let's run and see if it works. I don't know. I'm just going to try now. I don't know if this really going to work. If it doesn't work, pardon me. We'll rewrite the code. Now I'll run our query. Query.js. What we have done in the query.js is basically called diabetes spelling. It's there in our smoke.js. Let's figure it out. Paste. Save. run query.js. Failed to evaluate. Diagnosis is not defined. Where it is not. Diagnosis. Why am I doing this kind of limits? Save. Run everything now. Again, let's do that problem. And instead of adding all the data one by one, this time meanwhile we'll just change it. Hope you got the point. So change this. Okay. Okay, P1, patient 1, 2, patient 2, 3, and patient 3, 4, patient 4. All of them here. All this. Okay. So key 1, key 2, 3, 4. One, 4, patient 5. I have all the patients and everything there. Hope by this time that our network also should be up running. Yes, it is. Now let me register user. Node.js. P2 has already been declared. P5, Q4, 2, Book.js. Working. All right, so all 5 is done. Let's check if all 5 is done. I'm gonna refresh. Ask me to log in. Password. Okay. Channel. Yeah. Awesome. Everybody is there. Now it's time to query. Query. Node query.js. Get query result is not a function because it is definitely not a function. Okay. It's a name mistake. Okay. Get query result. Capital R. Camel casing, guys. Don't forget. Get query result. Okay. This is the format. Get query result. Remember it. Do not make the mistake which I made, which I always make. Okay. Save it. Run it. It's done. Okay. time to repeat repeat code for life. Node register user node. When it's all done, now we know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It took a little more than a second. It's done. See. Come on, you can do it. Yeah. Yes, we got it, guys. Look, so we got two keys. Okay. This is P2 and P3. They both have type this. Now let's change it to cancer. Right. Yes. Let's run the query.js. We get cancer guy. Okay. Awesome, guys. Now you know how to use a dynamic query. It is a very useful query when you are dealing with a large number of data, when you are dealing with the JSON data. It's very helpful. But remember, in order to use this uh, method, okay, get query result, you have to have the CouchDB running. Okay, if you don't have the CouchDB running, you cannot use this query result. Okay, so that's it for the video, guys. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for watching this, and do not forget to subscribe, do not forget to share, do not forget to comment. Thank you. Bye bye.